I'm going to introduce you to Kaylynn Iron. Her talk title is Building Bridges, Addressing Normalized Dysfunction. Kaylynn is a service agent at Connection Point, and I'm pleased to welcome Kaylynn to the stage.
Thanks for that introduction, Charlene. Just before we start, I should have used an atlas map because Google Map didn't help me get here. It was actually sending me in the wrong direction. So I just like to start off with a joke. It lightens up everything. Hi, everyone. My name is Kaylynn Iron. A little bit about myself. I grew up in a small Indigenous community by the name of Kennel Lake Cree First Nation. I have a very loving and supportive family. We're very close. We spent a lot of time outdoors, going to the lakes, rivers. We're surrounded by beautiful trees, wildlife. I can honestly say I had a very good childhood. But growing up in a small Indigenous community, I saw a lot of problems with alcohol and drugs and violence. And as a child, I didn't really question it. I'm like, oh, this is normal, this happens everywhere. So growing up, I was still very proud of where I came from, but I also carried this shame. And it wasn't until I started university and I learned more about the disgraceful history between the Canadian government and Indigenous groups. I learned about the atrocities of residential school, the 60s scoop era, and the staggering number of missing and murdered Indigenous men and women. I learned that in this country, time and time again, Indigenous people have been seen as disposable. And that was a sad truth to learn at a young age, but it is what it is. So now, examining my experiences growing up and the historical facts that I had learned, I've come to realize that the shame I carried growing up was not my shame to carry at all. It was a byproduct of a toxic and traumatic past endured by my people. And what was another byproduct of that toxic past, which is my topic for today, what stemmed out of that is my topic of normalized dysfunction. So I defined it as conforming to a standard that is a deviation from the norms of social behavior. More simply put, we as a society have become comfortable with the effects of trauma and what it has done in our society today, predominantly in Saskatchewan, because that's where we are. So with that information, I realized that it's embedded in us, like Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. We're just so used to it now that it's just there. So you can see it's evident in the rates when you look at the incarceration rates, the suicide rates, the addiction rates, and the high number of Indigenous youth in care. We are comfortable with it. So how do we address this? How do we become uncomfortable with normalized dysfunction? So I came up with these 3 steps that I've kind of used in my own way. So number 1, get educated on the issue. There's so much access to information now that there's simply no excuse. Number 2, reevaluate your own thoughts. Dig deep. Why did I become comfortable with this? Number 3, which is a very big one for me, I had to do this. I had to be open-minded to unlearn the toxic patterns that I just learned growing up. I had to unlearn misconceptions that I had about my own people. And I think these steps are necessary. They're necessary in building those bridges to make not only this province stronger, but this country that we live in and that we all love. And to do that, I think it's, I think it's important to do that because if we don't, to do this, we need to build those bridges, we need to first deconstruct normalized dysfunction by reevaluating our thoughts, getting educated on the issues, and being open to unlearn toxic patterns. It's a way to move from the shame of the past to a future focused on true reconciliation, moving from generations of trauma to generations of healing. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me today.